Hey everyone, Zach Kazan here. Just a quick note about today's podcast episode. Unfortunately, this is a slightly truncated version of our LVMH Watch Week wrap-up episode, as we had some audio issues toward the end that we couldn't quite work around. We're really sorry for the mishap, but we hope you enjoy this episode regardless. This is, again, our LVMH Watch Week recap episode, and you'll hear all of our thoughts on the new releases from TAG Heuer, Zenith, and Hublot. Zach Weiss and Garrett Jones were both on the scene in New York at the LVMH Watch Week event and have their hands-on impressions of these watches. Unfortunately, the part that you'll miss involves our takes on new watches from Louis Vuitton, Gerald Genta, Tiffany & Company, and Daniel Roth. That didn't make it past our audio issues, and will just be a mystery that we'll have to solve another day. Maybe we'll record another episode where we cover those watches in more depth. We really appreciate your understanding and apologize again for the shorter episode this week. We'll see you all again next week for another new episode, and we hope you enjoy this one on LVMH Watch Week. Take care. Hello and welcome to the Worn & Wound podcast. My name is Zach Kazan. I'm the editorial director at Worn & Wound. We have a full house today to talk about what is so far, early in the year, probably the biggest watch release week of the year, LVMH Watch Week. We've got a couple of attendees of the LVMH Watch Week festivities in New York, plus me, who did not attend the festivities, plus Liam, who also did not attend the festivities, but I think followed along, like me, from the sidelines. How's it going, everybody?
Doing great.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Swell.
Zach Weiss, Garrett Jones, Liam O'Donnell, thank you all for coming on the pod today. Before we talk about LVMH Watch Week, let's get the wrist check out of the way. Liam, I'm going to start with you because you've been the most controversial wrist check of the year so far. You're recording from home. Are you once again not wearing a watch?
Not wearing a watch today.
All right.
Just
this
to
is becoming.
Wow.
This is becoming.
If you were
a
to
meme.
imagine a watch on your wrist, what would it be?
Great question. Great question. Not any of these LVMH releases, I can tell you that much.
Oh wow! Shots fired right from the
I've got some
start.
thoughts to share with you.
Okay, all right. Well, that's
Hot
what we're
takes
here for.
right
That's
off the rip.
That's what the podcast is for. It's for our thoughts, unfiltered as they may be, on all these new releases. All right, non-wrist check out of the way with Liam. I have confidence the rest of the panel's wearing a watch. Garrett, what have you got?
I really just want to come at you to left field and tell you I'm not wearing a watch, but I am wearing my Oris Diver 65 date. I've got it on a nice spring yellow spring made strap. I'm obviously looking forward to getting some color back in the city and getting rid of this snow and slush we've been burdened with.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, Oris. You invoke the weather. I suppose it's time to discuss the massive winter storm that we're currently all experiencing. You guys are all in New York. Lots of snow in New York. I've seen some of the news footage. It seems like you guys got dumped on pretty bad.
Yeah, it was beautiful, honestly. I mean, despite being a lot of snow, it was very, very nicely, sort of falling.
Yeah, it all turns brown though eventually, right? It gets grimy and
very quickly.
Yeah. It's still snowing in New Hampshire. We're recording on early Monday afternoon, and there's just a lot of the white stuff out there. I'm not a fan. I'm ready for spring. It feels very distant right now, but what can you do? Zach, what have you got? What are you wearing?
I have on the Habring Irwin jumping second watch.
Very nice. Very nice. That's a good one. I am still wearing the Ming Minimalist. I'm still kind of in the honeymoon phase on this watch. I haven't really taken it off since it arrived about a week ago. It's great. I don't really have much else to say. 37 series case is kind of perfect. It's just really good, easy to wear watch. Still enjoying it.
Very cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey.
How's that?
What's that? The loom?
Is that white emission loom?
Yeah. So the white emission loom is interesting. It it's cool. It's a little weird because you don't really, once you start seeing it on this watch, you realize it doesn't really you don't really see that color on any other watch. It doesn't last very long. It's very short acting. It's definitely not the kind of loom that you rely on to tell the time in the dark necessarily. It's more just sort of it's a trick. It's a party trick. And you kind of have to use a very high powered flashlight to really get the full effect, but it's fun. It's a very watch nerd kind of thing. I heard on another podcast, on the Collective podcast, shout out to them, that Ming Tian himself actually applies the loom. He mixes it and applies the loom
on
these watches himself. So the hand of the maker is like evident on these watches with their with the white luminous compound. So I think that's kind of cool on a watch at this price point. So yeah, very, very cool watch. Still enjoying it. I might write something about this at some point, but for right now, just kind of still, like I said, still in that honeymoon phase. So
yeah, please bring it into the office next time you're in. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely we'll do that. All right, let's turn the page to LVMH Watch Week. We are recording about a week removed from LVMH Watch Week. LVMH Watch Week is kind of like the start of the new release calendar for watches. It has been for the last, I guess, like 4 or 5 years, or maybe how long they've been doing this, maybe a little bit longer. But it kind of feels like the unofficial kickoff to something, because like we're staring right down the barrel of Watches and Wonders, time to watches. There's a bunch of swatch previews, coming up that will be, involved to some degree. Brands are really kind of like, they're making their presence known. And the way LVMH brands do it is they kind of like all come together and release a bunch of watches, announce a bunch of novelties at the same time. This year they had a big event in Milan to like formally launch these things, which my understanding is US press wasn't really invited to. It was all, European press at the Milan event, as far as I know. And that's where kind of like all the like glitz and glamour aspect of the launch was. But they had an event in New York that Zach, you attended along with Garrett. You were able to see at least some of the new launches from TAG, Hublot, and Zenith. So I guess we can start there. I'd love to just kind of like get your impressions of both, the watches themselves and also what the LVMH Watch Week event sort of like means to you guys. Zach, you want to like kick it off and kind of like tell us your high level thoughts on sort of like
thoughts,
this spot on the calendar?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess it is, like you said, it's sort of the start of the luxury brand release cycle. And it certainly feels like, luxury brand release cycle. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It feels like what it is. And I mean, the event itself, is a perfectly nice event in a hotel. There's a bunch of suites have been rented, and they exhibit each brand separately in different suites. And, trying not to get into the watches yet. It's just like kind of a chill afternoon of watches and a lot of media. I mean, like every single press outlet and larger, influencer level kind of media outlet was there, all largely in the same rooms together, hanging out. Each session was like a little over an hour. So, I don't know. It had a relaxed pace. And everyone knows each other, so it's like, even though that's a lot of people in a room, there was no like fighting for watches or anything like that, Yeah. But it was also kind of limiting in how much content you could make, also because it was a crowded room and noisy and such. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't like that exciting. I know this is not the most lackluster. There's no like surprise part of this or anything, and generally speaking, the watches they showed, while plenty of interesting stuff, like. It does feel like they're holding back for Watches and Wonders still. So there wasn't any out of left field, wow factor sort of thing. And in fact, the most technical watches that were released this year from some of the brands weren't actually even available to look at. So
yeah. Garrett, does that sort of track with your experience of the event? This is your first time attending, if I'm not mistaken, an LVMH Watch Week event like this. Is that right?
Yeah, so I mean, first time for LVMH, kind of really the first time that I've been to one of these like multi-brand, all-encompassing press type of events. So it was really just different, I guess is a good way to put it. I'm at the point now where I'm starting to know a bunch of the other media personalities. A lot of these people, like I honestly forget just how many people are in New York, and kind of a good thing, because you see some people, you're like, oh yeah, you are, down the street, and like we get to catch up, as we run into each other at these things from time to time. But yeah, like Zach said, kind of felt like there might be some things that are hidden behind a curtain still. Some of the really cool pieces that I would have liked to have seen weren't there. But I think we're in Milan, just part of how this thing went. But overall, really nice event, and happy to have been there and got a chance to check some of these things out.
Yeah, I'm hearing what you guys are saying about kind of like leaving stuff on the table for Watches and Wonders or for later in the year. It does kind of like the experience I had, and Liam, I'm wondering if if you kind of have a take on this, is that when I was reading through the press releases, everything just seemed like really iterative. Like there wasn't like a big, there just wasn't like a lot of heat, coming from these brands in terms of like new stuff. There were a lot of variants, and particularly with Zenith, which we'll get to, they concentrated really on the Defies, this year for LVMH Watch Week, and like every single one, I sort of had the thought of like, didn't they already do this? Like, isn't this something that like already exists? And of course, like their new watches are just like slight variations. When you were kind of like reading the content that we made or looking at the press releases, or just kind of like reviewing some of the releases, is that sort of like your impression as well from what came about this year's?
Yeah. Generally, I would agree with that. I think it's unrealistic to expect total category breaking watches every single year. I think that's just an unrealistic expectation. So I can't poo-poo any brand for being iterative. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But I think if it's consistent year after year, or they're kind of showcasing that stuff as something groundbreaking when it's really not, I think that's a different conversation. But yeah, I would generally agree. This year felt, it was just sort of more derivatives of their existing portfolio. And I don't think that there was anything particularly bad, nor was there anything particularly good either. But there was obviously some brand new releases like Tiffany & Co. That I think we'll get to. But it was cool to see sort of more of the Defy range. I think that's probably one of Zenith's strongest portfolio watches. I think it's, so recognizable, and to have this in so many different flavors, I think is great for anyone who loves Zenith to have lots of choice there. It was cool to see some more Gerald Genta designs. I think, those are really cool, even though they're kind of feeling more like a sort of, an archival brand with sort of a corporate engine behind them. I still think it's cool to see these designs come to life. And yeah, I think, for Hublot, I think generally it's just like, if you like Hublot, this is like Hublot at full volume,
Yeah. I think it's important, like the point you make about it being like okay that the brands took this approach, I think is really important. Like these are all huge brands, like, but the core brands, I should say, TAG, Zenith, and Hublot, the brands that are actually like exhibiting in New York for press. These are like big giant brands that need to appeal to like a wide range of consumers to kind of like stay afloat. Like that's their business is selling watches. Like it's so it makes sense that at an event like this to kick off the year there would be a lot of kind of like big tent, for lack of a better term, watches to release that kind of appeal to the broadest range of potential buyers. Zach, I wanted to ask you. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I do wonder though if this is a little bit of like a preview of what this whole year might be like, considering that Swiss imports were something like down 52% in the watch industry, and they might be hedging their bets on pieces that are more divisive or more costly to make. And yeah, I mean, I think Heuer is probably the best example of that, also because Heuer is the most accessible brand of the lot there, so they are the largest volume, I imagine, of them all. And they had like a new size and a new color, and it felt like, just talking to them, they weren't like hiding. It's like some of these decisions were made to have mass appeal. Yeah. That, and that's just the reality of it. I mean, and they were like refinements, kind of like the 41 millimeter case. It's a refinement kind of thing. It makes it like more comfortable.
Yeah. Zach, I wanted to ask you specifically about the TAG, the Carrera Seafarer that you saw. So when you went to this event and you asked like, what kind of coverage are you looking for? And I said, just write about like whatever you think is the most interesting watch. And this is what you picked. So tell me why you picked the Carrera
That's what everyone picked, let's be honest.
Yeah, this seems to be kind of like the standout like release. So like tell us a little bit about your experience with this watch and what kind of drew you to it, to the extent that it did.
Sure. So, I mean, this Seafarer is a follow-up to like the Hodinkee limited edition that came out a few years ago, which I actually don't think I've ever seen in the metal, but I think we were all excited when that came out as well, cool because it's bringing back this iconic sub-line, which wasn't actually a Heuer line. The Seafarers were a contract line for Abercrombie and Fitch that was a chronograph that included a tide indicator, which is really a repurposed moon phase indicator with like a pronounced pusher. Like any moon phase will have a sunken pusher. They just make it a pronounced pusher to like be like, push it, And so you travel, you set your tide chart, or you set the tide graph based on what the chart is for the area. So then it'll be in keeping. And it's a clever little device, certainly. But it's really the aesthetics of those watches that, I think makes them such winners, particularly in the collecting circles now. I mean, they are particularly beautiful vintage watches. There's nothing really quite like the Seafarers. The Hodinkee one had a black dial sort of based on these Octavia versions, which, while cool, I don't think were quite the sexiest of the models. Sorry, guys. But it was clear that Heuer, I think, was holding back for like the home run, which is this cream dial with teal and like mustard. And they did the same thing. They put in the new glass box 42 millimeter case. It's the exact same case and build as the Hodinkee one, but just this dial. And they added some gold tone to it. So there's gold tone indices, hands, which they said they're 18 karat, I think plated actually. And it looks great. It really just looks great. I mean, like the glass box itself, it really melds vintage and modern together very well. It doesn't feel like, I'm going to throw a little shade at a watch here. That Omega Speedmaster that came out with like the tachometer dial that was like a dial they put into a Speedy Pro case, like that never made sense to me.
Yeah.
It's like a thing that didn't exist. Like this doesn't feel, there's no like anachronism or whatever between these two things being brought together. So that's, just well executed design. And yeah, the glass box itself wears really well. So that was a 42 millimeter case. It sat really nicely on the wrist. It's just, you put it on, you're like, this is fun. It was kind of what you're hoping for at least this kind of watch launch. You're like, yeah, this is an exciting piece. It wasn't the only watch I loved there, I will say. I mean, like, there was a Defy that I liked a lot, the Revival, but like just in terms of, I think, newness, there's more to talk about with this.
Yeah, it definitely seemed to, like I said, kind of dominate the conversation last week as people were sort of like metabolizing all of the LVMH Watch Week stuff. Garrett, you also, had a chance to see this watch in person. Any impressions from you? Did you have a familiarity with either the vintage Seafarers or the Hodinkee Elite, kind of like as a point of reference, or was this like a brand new sort of like experience for you?
So I didn't. I don't have any reference. I mean, really with TAG kind of as a brand as whole. Granted, I did get to shoot one of the other glass boxes that came out this year. So I kind of had just a brief touch with it. And I think one of the things that kind of made the Seafarers so impactful for me was that they had a vintage reference there.
Yep.
So you could one of the photos I got to shoot was it side by side, and you can clearly see this is what it was and this is what it is now, and see just where all the design references came from, and really just see what they were doing with it to kind of bring it back in this new modern interpretation of it, which was really cool.
Yeah. And you guys also saw the new larger Carreras, right? So the glass box previously, this was a big hit for TAG over these last few years, kind of like a watch that I don't know if it goes so far as saying got them back into the enthusiast favor, with these watches, but they really kind of became a favorite of a certain type of enthusiast who, appreciates the vintage aesthetic. Those watches were, I think, 39 millimeters, if I'm not mistaken. So the new ones are 41. Do you guys have a chance to try those on? Any thoughts on the larger size?
They seem perfectly nice without the 39s there to compare them to. There was just kind of no way to sort of tell how they felt. Right. You know what I mean? And the Seafarer is 42. It didn't really feel any different from the Seafarer in a quick try on. All of them, 39, 41, and 42, have 22 millimeter lugs. So there's aspects of them that are going to feel sort of the same, which is interesting design choice. But they fit well. It's kind of like I said, that case is very short lug to lug. The effect of the huge crystal, it just feels nice on the wrist. So the 41 felt fine. It's also date free, which was interesting because they talked about actually how date is so important for the larger market, but that felt like a little bit of an enthusiast nod on the 41s.
Yeah, no, that was an interesting decision that a lot of people kind of clocked as well as the lack of a date on the new references. Liam, I know you didn't get a chance to see the new larger size Carreras, although maybe you did because we did have one in the office for a bit. So I should let you speak to that. But do you have any thoughts on the 39 millimeter Carrera or the glass box format in general, any experience with those watches at all?
Yeah, I have. I remember experiencing it when they first sort of released that, and I thought it was arguably one of the best releases the TAG has ever put out, and kind of the new standard for TAG moving forward. I think it really redefined the brand for a lot of people, maybe just getting into watches. I think this is a great way for them to sort of introduce themselves to sort of new enthusiasts. But the Carrera Seafarer from this year, I think it's great. I think, this is the most like enthusiastic friendly release from LVMH this year. And I think it kind of nails that modern vintage, like balance better than, most sort of heritage reissues that a lot of brands do. I don't really love the gold sort of accents. I feel like it makes it too much of like a dress. Like that to me, that's an element of like a dress watch. Whereas this watch, arguably has way more tool DNA than I think, this design gives it. But I think just generally the overall aesthetic of the watch is great. Beads of rice, super comfortable. As far as I'm aware, it doesn't have micro adjust, but
Did not.
it didn't. Yeah, so
No.
you know,
The bracelet's very nice.
right?
To say.
Great bracelet,
Really smooth bracelet on that.
And I think probably the upper limit for me for this size. I know that it's a lot of watch, and especially with chronograph movements, it's hard to get into a smaller case watch. But I would say it's kind of still thick at like 14 and a half millimeters. And I would argue that like the TAG is kind of drifting into sort of Omega pricing territory, like with these kinds of releases, whether that's intentional or not, I don't know. But regardless, yeah. I just love the Tide Indicator. I think it's so fun. It's such a niche novelty kind of complication. And I just love that it exists, and it has such cool colors and markings. So
yeah, no, it's definitely cool. It's fun that they brought it back in this format. Before we move on to another brand, I guess that, this is a good time to maybe address pricing. I'm wondering, Zach and Garrett, if that was a part of the conversation that you guys were having with our either media colleagues or colleagues at brands, or just kind of like between the two of you. Do you sense any kind of like themes in pricing this year? It's been a topic of conversation for a while, obviously, in the watch industry. So this being the first big release event, people are like laser focused on it. Any comments on the pricing of these watches at all?
It didn't come up.
Didn't come up. All right. Well, there's the...
Yeah, but I mean, in almost like a elephant in the room kind of way, I think, and there's a little bit, you get that sort of like, I don't know, environmental jadedness that, happens at Watches and Wonders too, where you're like, here's a $150,000 watch, here's a $8,000 watch. So like by comparison, it's, very different. But to just like take a step back and think of it from like a consumer perspective or, whatever, like, yeah, there was no like how much the price has gone up or anything like that. And, admittedly, I didn't ask that either. It didn't really feel, it's funny, it didn't really feel like the people you'd ask it to who were presenting it to us, they weren't really, they're not responsible for that kind of a thing.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I talked about it in what I wrote up for the Seafarer. I mean, it's over $8,000.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's in Omega territory, or even though Speedmasters have jumped up quite a bit, it's pushing on Omega territory, where I feel like, to me, Heuer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, Tudor territory is now a little bit more than it was a year ago.
Yeah.
Things just kind of keep going up. It seems like there's a trajectory to this.
I just really wonder, like, I mean, they sell, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of watches a year or something like that. And like, I don't know if anyone on this call would use their $8,500 to buy a brand new Seafarer versus another brand. You know what I mean? I just don't know if the argument is there anymore but I mean, I'm also, and I'll probably say this, like my bias is towards indie brands. So like for me, if I'm going to get at a certain price point, I'm going to be going towards a different, like I'm going away from luxury groups. So
yeah, I mean, so that's really the thing. Like, it feels harder and harder for me to weigh in on this topic with any sort of because we're on the same page, Zach. Like, if I have that amount of money, or like even frankly, like less than that amount of money, like an amount of money that I would spend on like a Ming minimalist, even like I'm thinking about what I can get that's like unique for that. For that price, something that like stands apart, that is like, where I see like actual value that maybe isn't like as mass produced, that I don't know, like that just kind of like reflects the values of what I appreciate in watchmaking. And yeah, for close to $9,000, you just have to really love a Carrera to spend that kind of money on it. And a lot of people do love the Carrera. The Carrera is a historic watch, a great watch by any metric. It's just that watch at $9,000, or a watch like it, at $9,000 or approaching it feels further from what I'm personally interested in, these days. Before we move on to another brand, I just do want to call out a really great interview that David Von Bader had with TAG Heuer's heritage director, Nicholas Biebuk. I apologize. I feel like I mispronounce his name every time I utter it. So my apologies there, but we'll link to that in the show notes. Really, really interesting conversation. And Nicholas alludes to a big kind of he's hyping it up, understandably, because he works for TAG Heuer, but he alludes to like a big Watches and Wonders release that's going to make people think differently about the brand. Like he kind
That's
of,
interesting.
Doesn't really talk about like the price point, of it necessarily, but, really teasing something that is going to be like, talked about and discussed and like could kind of like recontextualize how people think about TAG. So yeah, go ahead, Zach.
I was just something that was interesting about the TAG meeting. So this is like the year of chronographs for them. I think it's an anniversary. They put a lot of emphasis on their, history as a chronograph innovator as well as manufacturer. And they went through a whole long timeline. It was like a 20-something stop timeline, which was pretty interesting, I have to say. And towards the end of it, the last decade or 15, 20 years, something like that, they hit on some of those really crazy watches, like the micro girder and stuff like that.
Yeah, those are cool.
Which I think there's this little blip of history where Heuer was doing something really exciting and innovative that got shelved for financial reasons. Like, who knows? It was sort of a weird time. It was maybe not the right time for that to be happening commercially. And once they did not allude to anything, but based on what you're saying, I kind of wonder if they might go back to something like that to be like, here's some technological breakthroughs again.
Yeah.
Which would be cool. Which would be very cool.
I mean, there's a real history of, that brand kind of like advancing like timekeeping technology. So like, I think for them to, it's interesting that they focus on that in the presentation. That combined with what Nicholas says in this interview, I think maybe points towards something. I'm very curious to see what they introduce next year. Last year was the introduction of the their big release was the Formula One, which is a very consumer oriented product, very like inexpensive compared to other things at an event like Watches and Wonders, although people certainly complained about the price of that watch. So it would be interesting to see it's just be interesting to see how, like, what direction they go in this year, but something a little bit more high end or luxury oriented or technology focused. I guess we'll know in just a few short months at Watches and Wonders. All right, let's shift to Zenith. So Zenith, this was a Defy year for Zenith. It feels like only a few short years ago, I was begging for Zenith to focus on the Defy because they were just, just Chronomaster everything, El Primero everything. And I was like, you guys have the Defy too. The Defy is awesome. And now they've maybe I'm getting a little tired of the Defy. I don't know. Like it feels like it's just been like Defy nonstop. I kind of think of these Defy releases in two buckets. There's one bucket that just includes the revival, the 3, which, every year they do a revival piece, at least one, throughout the year. And this is a recreation of one of the original Defy bank vault, quote unquote, that's the nickname for it, watches with the 8-sided case and a 16-sided bezel, kind of an iconic design. And then they released a bunch of other updates across the Skyline collection. Garrett, let's start with you. You photographed these watches. What are your preferences from the Defy collection? What really stood out to you?
I mean, I think visually speaking, it's really hard to not go straight to the black ceramic with the gold skeleton dial. I absolutely love skeleton dial movements, whole 9 yards. I think it's fantastic to be able to see any and all pieces of the movement that I can. So I absolutely just love that one. I mean, I personally love a lot of the Defy cases and the angularness and just the way that it looks, and it feels good on my wrist. Don't think I'm adding one to the collection anytime soon, but who knows? But yeah, I mean, I absolutely just love that watch. I really would have loved to have seen the Tourbillon that they released, which unfortunately wasn't in New York. Fingers crossed, maybe somewhere I'll get to come across it, because love Tourbillons, love Defy's angulars. Seems like a good mashup for me.
I didn't know you were such a Tourbillon guy all this time.
I love Tourbillons. I think they're kind of useless, but I love the way they function.
All right. I can't wait for your first tourbillon. One of these days, Garrett's going to come into the office and he's going to have a tourbillon on his wrist, and we're just going to be like, well, he said he was a tourbillon guy. So, yeah.
We'll see. I mean, I make no promises. You all know how I am about like I'll find a good deal on something and I'll jump on it. So
yeah,
it's not out of the cards, but it's not planned either. I'll put it that way.
Okay, fair enough. It's like it's like that meme. You won't know I've won the lottery, but there will be signs. It'll be
exactly.
Yeah, you'll have
There'll just be more knives.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
if I come in with a flying tourbillon, you'll know.
Okay. Yeah, that Skyline skeleton with the gold dial is definitely the one that stood out to me. I feel like maybe I don't know if that's like the consensus pick, or was like the consensus pick in the room at the event, but like it definitely has like a strong visual appeal. Zach, I know you were a fan of the revival. Do you want to kind of like talk a little bit about what drew you to that and just maybe your overall thoughts on Zenith more broadly at LVMH Watch Week?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the revival, I like those. I like all of them, I think, and particularly, in this bank vault case, as you put it, they didn't have the other ones they'd released in the last couple of years to like look at them next to each other. Seeing some photos, I think the dial of this was a little bit more appealing to me, just like the shape of the markers and things like that. And it's a very simple dial ultimately, and it's all monochromatic silver. And the top of the case is fully polished, which I don't know if the other ones are like, but it gave it a really funky mirror liquid metal kind of effect to it. It's just a beautiful watch. But that case fits super nicely. It really does feel like a distinctive shape from anything else out there, even more so than the modern ones. Like this feels like a truly just unique shape that nobody else maybe ever wanted to touch on. It's like a weird shape. Honestly, and it made me think a little bit about that collab they did for Geneva Watch Days with the furniture company. Which I'm and like I've searched a couple of times to see if one of those would pop up. I honestly would grab one of those if I could. That is such a cool watch, and kind of just they were sold out probably by the time we saw them, so it didn't even matter. But then the rest of the watches, super nice. I agree with Garrett. The black and gold model was striking. I mean, as anything with like a fully rose gold dial will be, and then in a black ceramic case, like that is a easy win combo kind of a thing. There was an all black chronograph, as I recall. And then there was like maybe some new sizes and things. The rest didn't necessarily leave like the strongest impression, but they're all just sort of like, they're iterative part of the series sort of thing. Nothing offensive either, certainly.
Yeah. There was a 36 millimeter Defy with a silver dial. It looks like I think that 36 millimeter size is actually like pretty good for the Skyline. Like it's I remember trying on the ones that they came out with last year, and like kind of like more, they had like some pastel colors. They clearly like are thinking those are like ladies / unisex watches, but like 36 is just a good size for an integrated bracelet sports watch for almost anyone. I have a larger wrist and find that like that size works like pretty well, generally speaking. But they, similar to previous years, like this one has, the standard bezel and then also one with diamonds. So like it kind of like tells you what they're thinking, with that watch. I got to say, I haven't been won over by the Skyline chronograph yet. That one just seems a little like, I don't know, like clunky to me, sort of like it's just not, I don't know. I don't know if the Defy needs to be a chronograph, exactly. I kind of like, I learned to like appreciate and love the Defy through vintage Defys, and like all the sought after ones are time and date. So just, I'm not sold on the Skyline chronograph yet, but I do kind of, I think the degradé black bezel is a nice look. I'm not a huge fan of the way that watch wears. Liam, any thoughts on what Zenith did at LVMH Watch Week with the Defy, or the Defy in general?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great sort of package for Zenith. I think this is a very compelling, like a mass market release, and I think a lot of these appeal. I think this will have wide appeal to a lot of people, and I think they did well to sort of ground this entire release sort of with a theme. Like this is our modern city watch platform. I think with this, heavy emphasis on like architecture and sort of material. While I think the Skyline chronograph, the skeleton with the black ceramic and gold, and the tourbillon, like to me seems reminiscent of sort of what IWC does with their like pilot lines, where they have the core everyday tool watch version of it, and then they have these really dressed up sort of prototype versions of it. Like this to me feels like the same kind of thing, which I think is great sort of experimentally to see like how far you can push the DNA of a certain line within your brand portfolio. But to me, like, I wouldn't buy one, but I appreciate that they exist. I do love the Defy Skyline 36 in steel. I think, like, this to me has enough of Zenith's aesthetic in it, but also, like, won't shout across the room either. I feel like it would be one of those things you could just sort of quietly enjoy, but also know that it's kind of really unique as well at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it is sort of the commercial backbone, I think, of Zenith for this, like, you know, this sort of category for them. It's wearable. You could probably gift it. It's scalable. I think you could do, like, you know, 33, 36, and 39 if you really wanted to. And then, yeah, the revival I think is always cool. It's like, best move here is like reminding people that they have, you know, really cool heritage roots, that they made really cool watches that were very design forward, you know, and that they haven't forgotten about it. Ladder bracelet, not for everyone. I think it's cool though. Like, it works for this watch because it is kind of really funky looking, and I think it's a great way to get sort of a mostly steel tool watch that doesn't look like every other stainless steel tool watch. So yeah, no, not mad.
Yeah. I've said before, I'll say it again right now. I love I revere the Defy. Like, Defy is like one of my favorite sports watch lines ever. There are so many cool old Defy references that, like, they could resurface in, like, different case shapes that I wish they'd, like, dig a little deeper into the catalog. Like, I think they've done the bank vault. There are other options for Zenith, so I would encourage them. I'm sure they have, you know, like, looked in the catalog. They have a good, you know, heritage department there, and then they know what they're doing. But man, like, there are examples of, like, you know, the Defy revival kind of concept that I would buy, you know, if they did it, but they haven't quite done it yet. So yeah, I'm still waiting. Maybe Watches and Wonders. Who knows? Like, as we've said, LVMH Watch Week is probably not the place where they would, like, debut something, you know, that's more like on the radical, less commercial side. So let's talk quickly about Hublot. I feel like Hublot maybe had, just from an outsider's perspective this year, it kind of felt like the weakest lineup, which is hard for me to say because I love Hublot. I think that they do a lot of crazy stuff. I just didn't see a lot of crazy stuff this year, although maybe the Novak Djokovic tourbillon qualifies. We didn't write an article on that. I chose to focus on the Big Bang original Unico chronograph. That seemed like kind of like the biggest, kind of like broadest, you know, like, release this year. But Zach, what are your thoughts on Hublot's output this year? I know you spent some time with the Novak Djokovic, lighter than a tennis ball, apparently. Tell me everything you know about that watch.
Yeah, Hublot, like, for a brand at their price point, always releases a ton of stuff, which I think is interesting. Like, they had more on display than any other of the brands we saw that day. And I think probably, any other from LVMH Watch Week. Like, there was probably 12 watches or something like that there from multiple lines. Yeah, I mean, Hublots are Hublots. They are loud and vibrant and not unappealing. I'm not, like, there is something about some of their models that they're cool. They're technical looking. They're very mechanical, but in like a Gundam mech kind of a way, less of a, you know, like a steampunk or anything. Like, they're very, there's something interesting about them, you know, all the hate aside. Like, none of them fit me even remotely well. Like, the crest on the strap starts like at an 8-inch wrist or something. Like, they're ridiculous. All that said, the Novak Djokovic watch, which is this ultralight watch, you know, sort of in you know, in the RM world, but obviously different type, as an ultralight automatic tourbillon with a skeletonized dial and a strange material case, some sort of composite aluminum. It's super light. It's very funky looking. It's a cool looking watch. It's a watch that you can't really take in all at once. There's like a ton going on. You know, even there's a micro rotor on the top of the dial and stuff like that. Like, you don't even see the tourbillon at first, almost. Flip it over, and there's elements that are meant to look like tennis racket strings, kind of like, it's just a lot. It's a lot. That one had a Velcro strap, so even though still far too large, cinched all the way down, at least I could, like, close it reasonably for a couple of photos. And yeah, super light, 56 grams or something, lighter than a tennis ball.
Yeah, it's like when you get to that lightness, it's like you reach like that disconcerting level where, like, you hold the watch and it's like it doesn't feel real almost. Garrett, did you get a chance to mess around with the Novak Djokovic at all? I'm curious what your thoughts are on a, like, super ultra light but high end watch like that.
it's one of those things like I just don't have a frame of reference for it. It in its own bubble is cool and interesting, and like I appreciate it. I respect what they're doing with it. But as somebody that doesn't have like is not used to that kind of watch, is not a tennis fan, is not very familiar with Hublot at all, like it just kind of lives on its own little pedestal that I kind of need to learn more before I can really like categorize it. It visually was super interesting, lots of depth and detail, almost overwhelmingly so. And I think like, you know, what Zach said about being kind of like Gundam mecha vibe is spot on. Like that's 100% where my mind went until I realized that it was tennis related. And then I could see all of the comparison points they were making. It's interesting. I don't think it's something I'll put on my wrist. Props to Zach for throwing it on for some photos, but it's cool.
So you're a tourbillon guy, but not a tennis ball tourbillon guy. We're narrowing it down.
I do have lines, apparently.
If somebody hands me a $120-something thousand watch, I'm gonna put it on. I mean, that's just
those are the rules.
One thing that was cool about it, just in the like theme being related to Novak Djokovic, is that it the amount that they made per color. So we saw the bluish gray one, which I think is meant to be turf, and then there's a reddish one for clay, and then a green one for grass. The amount made is the amount of tournaments he's won on those courts, or something like that. Which is a nice little nod.
There's, I think it's 101 pieces, 71 blue, 20 something green, and like single digit numbers on the orange.
Yeah,
it's got to step it up on the clay, I think. I mean that's there's a whole like mini universe of like tennis themed watches. Alec Dent just wrote about the new Maurice de Mauriac Rally Master, which is, I think, you know, kind of like an annual release at this point. Although I think this might be the final one.
I think this was the last one.
But that's been like a cool thing to like look forward to. I know people who are like, you know, they're both interested in tennis and watches, and like people really like, you know, enjoy those Rally Master watches just because of the way they incorporate, you know, like just certain aspects of the sport into the watch in like a tasteful way. It doesn't like hit you over the head with it. Something else I wanted to ask you guys about. So there were several brands that take part in LVMH Watch Week that are not actually at LVMH Watch Week, at least in New York. These brands had a larger presence at the Milan event, but of course there are, you know, like other brands that are part of the LVMH, you know, portfolio. There's Louis Vuitton itself, you know, they have their own watchmaking, you know, enterprise, and then there's also Gerald Genta, Tiffany and Company, and Daniel Roth. And we covered all these watches in one way or another. I know you guys didn't have a chance to see them. I guess maybe we can start with Louis Vuitton. I had a Slack conversation. I think maybe Zach, it was myself and you and Kat. And I think I said, like, I don't know if it's a hot take, but like the Louis Vuitton watches are like clearly the best watches to come out of LVMH Watch Week. I think that that brand has really like matured quite a bit since the Fabrique du Temps sort of like association has like really solidified. There's really like interesting watchmaking happening, and I think the watches are like quite beautiful. I don't know if you had a chance to dive into those watches at all. You know, kind of like take a look through them. Any thoughts at all on the Louis Vuitton pieces?
Yeah, I agree. I think that it seems to be the brand that they're most willing to experiment with, and that makes sense, being that like Daniel Roth and Gerald Genta have such strong aesthetic DNAs associated with the like enthusiasm for them that you can't necessarily break free. Genta less so than Roth. With Louis Vuitton. I'm on casual terms with them now. You know, it's Vuitton. Like it's always been, you know, more of a fashion brand, more experimental, and, you know, and a little bit more ostentatious, perhaps. And actually seeing them kind of hone that in and going in more of a classic route. I think utilizing the movement manufacturing they have, the case manufacturing they have to kind of flex, I think is turning out well. And because there isn't that, like, you know, you don't have the double ellipsis case you're bound to, like, they don't, like, each watch can sort of be its own thing. And I like that. So, you know, the one that stood out the most to me, and I didn't realize was a minute repeater at first, was the Jump Hour.
Yeah.
It's a sneaky hit minute repeater. That's where you get the $400,000 price point from, unfortunately. But it's just a very well executed, elegant, like nicely designed watch. Like there's almost like it's conservative, but at the same time not. I don't know. traditional but not conservative. Maybe that's what I want to say. Like there's elements to it, but it doesn't feel too bound to anything. It's got some really beautiful watchmaking. Yeah, it's just like a straight up, like any brand who released that, I feel like maybe it looks most like a Chopard or something like that. I'd be like, that's a hot watch, retrograde 60-minute counter and a jump hour. And then they threw a minute repeater in there, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, just for the fun of it. It's like, it's very ostentatious if you know like what to look for, but like otherwise it feels, like you said, like a very traditional, kind of dress watch. I'm looking through. So Brett Braley wrote an article that kind of like covers all of these watches, kind of like provides an overview of each Louis Vuitton release, and just like every single one is like really beautiful. Like they really didn't miss this year. There's also a cool clock that they made with P, which of course is also an LVMH brand now. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff. I like the Tambour Convergence Guilloche is probably my favorite. It has like a closed dial with a guilloche pattern and a trailing hour and minute display at the top. I just think it's just a solid like block of gold, on your wrist. It's just like really, really finely finished. It's kind of a shame that they didn't have these watches available for press in New York to look at. I would have loved to have seen some live photos from you guys. Garrett, did you get a chance to kind of like to look at Brett's article or take in any of these Louis Vuitton pieces at all?
Yeah,
there's a Tourbillon in there for you.
I know there is.
Yeah,
it's kind of one of the things that jumped out at me. I think Zach put it really well. Is like, my expectations for a number of these brands are set. When Zenith is coming out with new stuff, especially in Defy, I have an idea what it should be. Heuer's kind of in the same boat. Hublot, I expect them to do really big and kind of ostentatious things and push the envelopes, especially when it comes to material. With LV, I really don't have any expectations, and kind of just like flipping through everything that came out of LVMH, I think it's, maybe it's a hot take, maybe it's not, but I think a lot of the LV watches really could be the stars that came out of this. There's lots of technicality, lots of functionality that really put it in this kind of like ballpark of its own. You can tell they're really putting effort into not only the style and look of the watch, but the technical science behind it. That I think, as someone that won't be buying any of these, they do things that make it justify the price in my mind. Absolutely love all of the guilloche work that was done on those two models. And of course, the car truck clock, combination is absolutely fantastic. I always love seeing those when they come out, like whatever weird combinations people cook up with. And like, if there was anything from LVMH that I could get a chance to just like have and hold for a period of time, it would be the truck clock. Like, I just love that. That would do it for me.
Toy truck.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's the breakout piece for social media. I think Garrett wants the truck clock to play with. Yeah, it's cool. They did a lot of really cool stuff. I think that there was a period of time where people kind of thought of the Louis Vuitton watches as like quote unquote fashion watches and didn't take them very seriously. There's always been like real watchmaking happening, at the Louis, within the Louis Vuitton brand. They're just like, they're doing a much better job of kind of like teaching us about it, at this stage. And they've invested a lot into it with Fabrique du Temps, and just sort of, they're just part of the fabric of the watchmaking world at the high end, at this point. So yeah, very interesting stuff happening there.
Can I make one snide comment?
Please make at least one. Feel free to make more. The
Tambour Convergence Guilloche, I agree, it's beautiful, and I think perhaps more striking than the jumping hour, certainly. But I don't understand why that is a trailing hour. It just seems like a strange choice to have made when price is clearly no object, and they could have just made that a jumping hour as well.
Did they stick a Zenith Elite movement in there or something? Is that what happens?
It's that one. Yeah, that could be one.
I don't know.
That's what's in the Gentas, right? That people
yeah. We'll get to that.
The other thing is that thing must be a nightmare for fingerprints. That only looks nice if you can't touch it or you're always wearing gloves because, and then the guilloche itself, if that's on the surface, like it's going to get crud in it. So
this might be one of those watches that's like not really meant to be worn day to day. I know that's sacrilege, but hey, it's
beautiful though.
Yeah, piece of art. Maybe
it reminds me a bit of some of the brigades they came out with last year that were like the all brigade gold dial and case. They were incredible looking in person.
Yeah.